The Department of Homeland Security was once the perennial worst place to work in the federal government, but DHS is no longer at the bottom of the Partnership for Public Service's annual rankings. How did DHS spark those improvements, and where does it go from here? To answer those questions, Federal News Network's Drew Friedman and Justin Doubleday sat down with Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
We moved up in the rankings now for the second year in a row, something that we're very, very proud of. It is the product of significant focus on employee well-being and investing in our workforce in a number of different ways. And so we really have made the well-being of our workforce our top organizational priority. We've invested the time and resources accordingly, whether it is fighting for and achieving pay fairness for our TSA employees, to surveying our workforce through pulse surveys, understanding what their concerns are and addressing them, whether it's our jump teams going out into the field, trying to understand what the challenges are and helping our workforce overcome those challenges. We have been intensely engaged with our workforce in understanding what they need and delivering for them.
And just a quick follow-up to that as well, the jump teams, that was a really interesting point to me. And I know at the Best Places to Work ceremony, which I attended a couple weeks ago, you also mentioned an employee steering committee. So can you talk about a little bit more specifically how those cohorts or coalitions function and what they do for employee well-being?
So the principle really underlying them all is that we don't have a monopoly on what the workforce needs. We want to hear directly from them and involve them as a team in addressing the challenges. The jump team concept was actually born of my visit to a facility that was woefully inadequate. The employees who worked there actually affectionately called it the House of Pain. The lighting was poor. The connectivity was poor. Some of the facilities were just awful. And we turned that around really rapidly.
One of the things that we noticed in the 2023 FEVS survey for DHS was that about 47% of DHS employees said that they believed the results of the survey will be used to make the agency a better place to work. And I think that compares to about 60 or so percent across the federal government. So how are you working to change that perception that, the feedback that employees give about their workplace and their work will be used to improve things?
Well, I think that that statistic you cited referred to the FEVS survey specifically. And what we have communicated to the workforce, that annual survey that is pretty well defined in terms of the questions asked and the process followed, is not by any stretch the only vehicle that we employ to understand what our workforce needs. I think the score would be much, much higher if one asked the employees, do you think the pulse survey, do you think the jump team, do you think all of these vehicles will actually yield results for you? I think we would do far, far better.
And can you give you mentioned one already, but can you give a couple examples maybe of what you've heard from employees where you have made changes as a result of some of the feedback that they've given you?
So condition of facilities is one. Improvement to the hiring process is another. Resources needed for employee well-being, whether that's counseling, workday flexibility, support services for our personnel, a wide range of resources and responses. Making it easier to get a pen if one's ink runs out. I mean, it's incredible. I remember this from early on in my career in the Department of Homeland Security. I visited one facility, and I came in with these grand ideas about employee well-being. And somebody raised their hand and said, if you can get our computers to boot up faster in the morning, we'd be a lot happier. And everyone laughed and applauded. It actually is reflective of the need not only to take care of big things, but the little things can matter a lot too.
And when you're looking at some of the different areas within the survey that are measured, what are some of the areas that you're targeting for specific improvement here in 2024? We're already about midway through the year. Are there areas that you're tracking or actively looking to make up some ground in?
There are a few. One is facilities. I think that the conditions in which one works matter a lot, especially when one is out in the field. Decent lockers for one's equipment when one is out in the hot sun. Something like that. And also streamlining the hiring process as well as the security clearance process, as well as the ability to move from one part of the department to another, and having that exposure. Those are 3 areas.
I'm glad you brought up hiring, staffing, just the ability to staff positions. I mean, I think we've seen at some of, especially the frontline agencies like ICE and CBP, kind of staffing challenges can lead to morale challenges. So how are you looking to streamline the hiring process and fill positions, faster with better candidates, so on and so forth?
It's a multi-part process. First is innovative ways of recruiting talent and going to different places that we might not otherwise have gone to in the past to find that talent. We've been speaking, for example, with women in law enforcement groups to be able to recruit more women into law enforcement. We have a goal of 30 by 30, which is 30% representation by 2030. We're going to exceed that goal, but where can we best recruit talent? And then the hiring process takes a long time. There are certain speed bumps, if you will. For example, the polygraph exam and how we administer it and how we evaluate the results. Without curtailing security thresholds, we can drive a far greater amount of efficiency in those processes. And we lose candidates sometimes because of the length of time it takes to onboard them. That's especially true in the tech sector, but also in law enforcement and elsewhere. And also, a vacant position is a drain on morale because the work needs to get done, and that means others are shouldering more.
One thing that I think we also noticed in the FEVS results and best places to work and just the general tone for the DHS workforce was that despite that there being some definitely promising improvements in best places to work, for example, DHS is still kind of on the lower quartile for a lot of areas. So things like professional development, recognition for employees. Are there specific pain points that you're looking at trying to address in the most immediate term?
I think we have to be very clear-eyed and fair in understanding some of the pain points. And so when we take a look, for example, at the Border Patrol and the operational challenges that they confront, the difficulty of their work, how that difficulty is more acute in times of high encounters, and making sure that they're able to do the job they signed up to do and not doing other types of work. And so what we have done and we continue to do is, for example, hire case processors so that our agents are out in the field doing the enforcement work they signed up to do. So I think there are some very fundamental reasons why the challenges are there, not to mention the fact that the work itself is extraordinarily difficult, and that can be very tough.
That ties back to what you mentioned earlier about employee well-being and that you offer counseling. Is that something that's available to all DHS employees? And I guess how does that program work?
We are expanding its availability, and we learn from some tragic incidents and our personnel having to respond to them, the need for that. We see, when I talk about people doing incredibly difficult work, just think about our personnel who are viewing images of online child sexual exploitation and abuse. The challenges there, we have tremendous facilities and support for them. But there are different levels of difficulty and there are different ways of addressing those.